Greetings, my fellow freedom lovers and sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful land of enchantment, which is also known as New Mexico. And today's date is Thursday, October 27th, 2016. My, oh my, oh my. That's all I have to say at this time, at this moment. Like I know hell was breaking loose in North Dakota with the pipeline protest. And of course, there's controversies on the whole thing with the Bundy case, which they were found not guilty. But other stuff I'm going to be addressing. It's like I see everything. I try to see everything in a bigger picture. That's why my early podcast I did today, 2 live feeds, which were quick ones, while I was watching the video of the DAPL protest at Standing Rock, watching the videos, and I noticed someone got shot with beanbags, and I seen people getting maced with the heavy canister mace. And so the corporations, man, they just want to take it over and destroy the land. And you can see the bulldozer, some of the bulldozers just plowing where the sacred grounds were. And you know, if you know me from the past episodes, you understand where I come from. So instead of, I'm gonna see what the latest stats is on it, and we'll go through the little past feed lines and so forth. All right, one moment. Yeah, okay, the latest one's around 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. This is from The Guardian, and it says here, things are calming down at the Dakota Access Pipeline protest near Cannonball, North Dakota. As night falls, it's been an eventful day. More than 200 police and riot gear deployed, pepper spray, and armored vehicles to push protesters off land belonging to the pipeline company. At least 16 people were arrested. Through Morton County Sheriff Kyle Kirkmeyer said more were en route to be processed. Kirkmeyer said that the police would be on the scene as long as it takes. Protesters reported police used stun guns, rubber bullets, and beanbag rounds. And I noticed too, like I was watching one video from Real News, and a horse got shot too, and it had a pretty bad wound. It says Kirkmeyer said they were not deployed, as far as I know. A group of activists protested outside Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters in Brooklyn in solidarity. And I just like I says here about the happened around 928. It says here, I like what it says here. About 117 protesters have been arrested at the Standing Rock camp. A spokesperson for the Morton County Sheriff's Department said currently law enforcement is engaged in a situation at the Backwater Bridge just north of the main camp. Protesters have lit a fire near the bridge, the spokesperson said in the statement. And you can go through all these photos of burning vehicles, and they even have LRAD Humvees with LRAD, which is considered to be a high frequency pitch noise to affect your hearing, to get you distracted. And they've used that in the Iraq War and protests for the conventions and NATO 3. I can go on. It's just totally insane. And I just find it's pretty disturbing on this aspect. But I'm going to hit some of the latest stuff here, which from the what's called the Associated Press. This is by Jack McPherson and Blake Nicholson. It says here, police evict oil pipeline protest from private land. As it reads, Cannonball law enforcement officers dressed in riot gear and firing beanbags and pepper sprays evicted protesters Thursday from the private land in the path of the Dakota Access oil pipeline, dramatically escalating a month-long dispute over Native Americans' rights and project's environmental impact. In an operation that took nearly 6 hours, hundreds of armed state and local police and National Guard, some on foot and others in trucks, military Humvees, and buses, pushed past burning barricades to slowly envelop the camp. No serious injuries were reported, though one man was hurt in the leg and received a treatment from a medic. More than a dozen protesters who refused to leave were arrested and taken to the Morton County Jail, Sheriff Kyle Kirkmeyer said. Among those arrested was a woman who pulled out a .38 caliber pistol and fired 3 times at officers. I don't know how accurate is that. Narrowly missing the sheriff's deputy. But it's okay if we get shot by beanbags and rubber bullets, right? That's okay because they're special. According to State Emergency Service spokesman Silly Fong, officers did not return fire, she said. Okay. Kirchmeier said that the camp has been cleared by nightfall, although police were still dealing with protesters on the perimeter. Through the officials earlier said they plan to turn to the site over private security. Kirchmeier said police would stay for now. We're not leaving the area, he said. We're just going to make sure that we maintain a presence in the area so the roadways stay open and keep the individuals from camping on private land. Opponents of the pipeline over the weekend set camp on private land owned by Texas-based Energy Transfer Partners, which is working to complete the 1,200-mile pipeline to carry oil from the western North Dakota to Illinois. Why do you need a pipeline that goes from North Dakota to Illinois? Trying to figure that one out. This route skirts the Standing Rock Reservation, and the tribe said it could endanger water supply and disturb cultural sites. The state of North Dakota says no sensitive cultural sites have been found in the area. The tribe has gone to court to challenge the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' decision granting permits at more than 200 water crossings. A federal judge in September denied their request to block construction, but 3 federal agents stepped in to order construction to halt on Corps-owned land around Lake Ove, a wide spot of the Missouri River, while cops reviewed its decision-making. Construction was allowed to continue on private land owned by a developer with a goal of completion by the end of the year. Thursday's operation, Push Out the Protesters, began a day after they had refused to leave voluntarily. Law enforcement repeatedly asked protesters to retreat. At one point, using a high-pitched whistle, they said it was intended to control and disperse protesters. That's the LRAD, okay? Which they did have. I saw the videos on that. It's a high-pitched sound. It's like an alarm, like really loud. So that's it's called LRAD. All right. The camp cleared on Thursday is located just north of a more permanent and large encampment on federally owned land, which has been main staging area for hundreds of protesters, including Native Americans across North America, environmentalists, and some celebrities. Many protesters only denied the officers, while others took part in prayer circles and burned sage. Cody Hall, a spokesman for the protesters, vowed a new camp would be built elsewhere in the pipeline's path, but on federal land. It's going to take a lot to move them. Protesters from there, he said. Authorities said protesters set fire to 4 pieces of construction equipment. At least 2 cars were also burned. Aaron Johnson, 50, a member of the Cheyenne River Sioux in South Dakota, said he and other protesters weren't happy with the day's outcomes. I came here for peace and prayer, he said. When somebody sets something on fire, that's not peace and prayer. Nicholson, reporter from Bismarck, North Dakota. There's a lot of contradictions going on here, too, because I didn't even know the so-called private property, allegedly private property, but is considered more of a territorial. It says more territorial for the Sioux. So it's like Sioux Nation. So I'm like, I don't know how accurate this report is, but I'm not really too keen. However, I also keep an open mind and good faith. One thing for sure, I was watching those videos, I was not really fond of what was happening, especially people getting shot with beanbags and other, most of it unarmed. I don't know where that 38 person with the 38 caliber came from. Didn't make any sense, but they have to have a lot more merit. Hopefully, it'll be more facts be coming in. And of course, here they come about the latest protester accused of firing 3 shots at police. The latest, same from AP, and it says here, latest on a Dakota oil pipeline protest at all. It says 7:15 p.m. So that's like Central Time. Charges are pending against a woman who allegedly fired 3 shots at law officers during an operation to force Dakota Access Pipeline. Protesters off private land. State emergency spokesman Cicely Fong says the woman was being placed under arrest when she pulled out a 38 caliber pistol and fired 3 times, narrowly missing the sheriff's deputy. Officers did not return fire. It wasn't immediately clear exactly what the incident happened when the incident happened. Law enforcement Law enforcement officers moved in on Thursday to evict protesters from a camp on private-owned land by the pipeline developer. Several protesters were arrested, and you just go down around here. The Army main camp of protesters is land owned by Army Corps of Engineers at 6:40 p.m. The agency has taken no steps to evict protesters. All right, but this is what Governor Jack Dalrymple said. Dalrymple said. This is from 6:20 p.m. North Dakota Governor Jack Dalrymple, maybe Jack as I call him, is pleased with the success of an effort to oust Dakota Access Pipeline protests from private land where they had set up a camp to try to block construction. Dalrymple says the operation that involved 200 officers and soldiers was well handled from start to finish. There are no serious injuries. Yeah, sure. Authorities launched the operation at midday to oust the protesters the day after they refused to leave voluntarily from the camp. They set up on land owned by the pipeline developer. The protesters were cleared from the camp late afternoon. Dalrymple said the protesters were given more than ample time to move on their own, that those who didn't leave voluntarily need to be dealt with as we have. Yeah, I can see him. I'll go there, get his hands dirty, right? That ungrateful parasite. Yeah, I'm not really too keen on that either. But it's gonna continue for a good long time. This is another battle, my friends. This is how you have to look at it. I just really find this disheartening because there's some good people out there unarmed. Allegedly, one person had a 38 caliber gun, while the government delegates, I call them, the law enforcement, police officers from other areas of North Dakota. Plus, there's claims some of them came from Minnesota. All right, and that's really like a pretty complete turnoff. And you hear in my earlier podcast, they even had a no-fly zone. Okay, that was released by freethoughtproject.com. So that's really very, like I said, I'm not really too happy about this at all. But I want to continue on here. This came from the whole, Democracy Now! Web exclusive, developing 100 plus militarized police raiding, no DAPL resistance camp blocking pipeline's path, so that folks could just little past archives here. And like it says here, in Cannonball, North Dakota, over 100 police with military equipment are advancing a resistance camp established by Native American water protectors in the path. Let's see here. One moment. In the path of a proposed $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline. Photos and multiple videos posted to Facebook Live Despit. Over 100 officers of riot gear lined up across North Dakota's Highway 1806, flanked by multiple mine resistance ambush protected military vehicles, MRAPs, a sound cannon, which is LRAD, an armored truck, and a bulldozer. They have also been reports from water protectors that the police presence includes multiple snipers. Police appear to be evicting the camp in order to clear the way for the Dakota Access Pipeline Company to continue construction, which was active at times on Thursday just behind police line. Cody Hall of Warrior Camp told Democracy Now! That behind the line of police, the Dakota's Access Pipeline Company is carrying out construction with cranes and bulldozers on the sacred tribal burial site, where on September 3rd, unlicensed Dakota Access security guards unleashed dogs and pepper spray against Native Americans. War protectors have set up a blockade of the highway using cars, tires, and fire. The elders are also leading prayer ceremonies. David Goldtooth of the Indigenous Environmental Network reported in a Facebook Live video just before 2 p.m. local time that police have begun arresting water protectors in an ongoing standoff. Sachin Sechem of the West Coast Women Warrior Media Cooperative told Democracy Now! Police have used tasers against water protectors, then that she was hit with a concussion grenade. And I heard some explosions too, so a frontline camp sits directly in the proposed path of the Dakota Access Pipeline on private property purchased recently by the Dakota Access Pipeline Company for $18 million. In establishing this frontline camp, water protectors cited an 1851 treaty which says it makes the entire area unceded sovereign land under the control of the Sioux. Over the weekend, police arrested more than 120 people in a peaceful march on this site, during which police deployed tear gas and used rubber bullets to shoot down drones the water protectors were using to document police activity. If we do it, that'll be a call felony offense, So that this is, you got these people think they're really special. It's like they're at war. Ahead of today's apparent police raid, the Federal Aviation Administration also issued a temporary no-fly zone for the airspace above the resistance camps for all aircrafts except for those used by law enforcement. They're so special. Do do. So effing special. Exactly. This order means Native Americans can no longer fly drones to document police activity, but police can continue to fly their surveillance drones and helicopters. They're the glamour folks, because they got a badge. We gotta kiss their ass. Exactly. That's how you have to look at it, my friends. It's totally ludicrous. The apparent police raid of the resistance camp comes only minutes before Sandy Rock Sioux youth flooded the Hillary Clinton campaign headquarters in New York City to demand Clinton oppose the Dakota pipeline. Don't hold your breath on that, my friends. To even my Native American brothers and sisters out there, Hillary Clinton will use you just like the rest of those governmental buffoons did in the past. And this is what I have to look at it. Look at this. It's totally acidine, okay? Like they can do what they want because they have the badge, right? So I got a question. I'm not surprised. I won't be surprised if the North Dakota Access Pipeline Company, the company that's based out of Texas, actually threw money in there for their troubles. So you know what? This is totally acidine and unacceptable. And the 851 treaty should have merit. I'm gonna have to look at that myself another time and give you my intake on it. So I'm gonna have to add that to my memo. But this is why I look at these things. It's like, oh my goodness, So it's Lord willing. I tell you one thing for sure: if that pipeline succeeds and anything seeps into the Missouri River, how are they gonna pay for it? Are they going to be going to jail? They'll probably just do a little skim, go, okay, I'll pull down my pants for you, corporate ones. That's how these sons of bitches operate. And this is why I say you have to know the enemy. Know your enemy. All right? It doesn't not the person, the color of your skin either. It's those bastards that want to screw everybody. So I'm going to hit this one over here. Hillary Clinton campaign response to DAPL face-off. It said, and by ICTMN staff. It says here, on a day they saw a large police action involving armor, military vehicles, pepper spray, high-velocity beanbags, and tear gas employed against water protectors who gathered to halt construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, owned by Energy Transfer Partners. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign officials issued a formal statement addressing the conflict. This announcement, made on October 27th, was written as a response to the letter to Native leaders had sent Hillary Clinton asking for her help. Charles Galbraith, serving as a Clinton advisor, shared the campaign's official statement in an email to ICTMN. We received a letter today from representatives of the tribes protesting the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. From the beginning of this campaign, Secretary Clinton has been clear that she thinks all voices should be heard and all views considered in the federal infrastructure projects. Now, all the parties involved, including the federal government, the pipeline company, and contractors, the state of North Dakota, and the tribes, need to find a path that serves the broadest public interest. As that happens, it is important that on the ground, In North Dakota, everyone respects demonstrators' rights to protest peacefully and workers' rights to do their job safely. As ICTM contributor Sarah Sunshine Manning reported this afternoon from the treaty camp, the newest camp set up by World Protectors directly in the pipeline's path along Highway 1806, police maced and pressed the protectors south using piercing sirens, armored cars, and ATVs while low-flying planes and helicopters circled above. Within minutes, Manning said a large force of police arrived on both sides of the camp and surrounded about 400 to 500 water protectors. The treaty camp is named in reference to the Treaty of Fort Laramie, which designed the land as it belongs to the Gray Sioux Nation, despite the order to halt construction by three federal agencies. DAPL construction has encroached approximately 17 miles into the 20-mile voluntary exclusion zone. Well, you know what? I'm not impressed with Hillary Clinton with this. You know how people who heard me for a good period of time know where I stand on that Jezebelian heart to the one world order. That's one thing everyone should look at, the 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie. I'm going to take the initiative and look at that myself, and I can see how long the pages are and so forth, and may just do a show on it. That's saying yes or no. Well, I think people have the right to be heard on this. Because like I said in the past, if they can do this on eminent domain, they can do it to anyone. It's called a domino effect. Not just one particular group, it's across the board for all humanity. That's how you have to see this, friends. You don't destroy nature. And there's always backfires. But as far as I'm concerned, the Clinton letter has no merit. She don't give a damn about them either. All right. Well, speaking, some interesting news here, some good little news here, and some people are going to be bitching about it. However, this is from the Oregon Live, came out today by Maxine Bernstein. It says here, jury finds all Oregon standoff defendants not guilty of federal conspiracy gun charges. A federal jury on Thursday found Amon Bundy, his brother Ryan Bundy, and 5 co-defendants not guilty of conspiring to prevent federal employees from doing their jobs through intimidation, threat of force during the 41-day occupation of the Mahler National Wildlife Refuge. The Bundy brothers and occupiers Jeff Banta and David Fry also were found not guilty of having guns in a federal facility. Kenneth Bendenbach was found not guilty of stealing government property, and a hung jury was declared on Ryan Bundy's charge of theft of an FBI surveillance camera. So that right there was interesting about that perspective. Are they going to do a retrial on this, or the prosecution is going to scrap it? That's the thing. That's what the thing about the hung jury is, like, jury nullification right there. That's still a win right now for that particular charge against Ryan Bundy. I will continue on here. More than we could have hoped for, said one of Amon Bundy's lawyers, J. Morgan Philpott. Stunning, said defense lawyer Lisa Ludwig, who was standby counsel for Ryan Bundy. I'm just thrilled, as Neil Rampler's attorney, Lisa Maxfield. Jury of 9 women and 3 men returned the verdict after 5 hours of deliberation on Thursday. The high-profile case that riveted the state and drew national and international attention to the federal bird sanctuary in rural eastern Oregon. Each defendant stood separately facing the jury as the judge read the verdicts. Amon Bundy, his hands clasped behind his back, nodded as the not guilty verdicts were read for him first. He smiled and rubbed the shoulders of his lawyer, Marcus Mumford. His older brother, Ryan Bundy, stood as his not guilty verdicts were read. He nodded and mouthed to the jury, "Thank you." Defendant Neil Ramper hugged and kissed his defense lawyer, Maxfield. Dakota to the stunning verdict, undoubtedly a significant blow to federal prosecutors as when Almond Bundy's lawyer, Marcus Mumford, argued that his client, dressed in a gray suit and a white shirt, should be allowed to walk out of court a free man. U.S. District Judge Anna J. Brown told him that there was a U.S. Marshal on hold on him from a pending federal indictment in Nevada. Look at that, huh? If there is a detainer, show me, Mumford stood arguing before the judge. Suddenly, a group of about six U.S. Marshals surrounded Mumford at his defense table. The judge directed him to move back, but moments later, the Marshals grabbed on him. "What are you doing?" Mumford yelled as he struggled and was taken to the floor. As deputy marshals yelled, "Stop resisting," the judge demanded everyone out of the courtroom now. Mumford was taken into custody, a member of his legal team confirmed. Almond Bundy's lawyer, J. Morgan Philpott, says afterwards on the court steps that Mumford had been arrested and marshals had used a stun gun or taser on his back. Another member of Almond Bundy's legal team, Rick Korber, echoed Philpott, saying he heard Mumford questioning in court why they're using the taser against him. Philpott decried the marshal's treatment of Mumford in the courtroom. "What happened at the end is symbolic of the improper use of force by the federal government," he said. By 6:30 p.m., Mumford was released from custody. He confirmed that he was struck with a stun gun once while he was on the floor in the courtroom. "I grew up on a dairy farm, so I'm used to some rough treatment, sure." "Sure," he said, but he said the actions of the U.S. Marshals were uncalled for. As I was walking, I was asking for was papers. "Just show me you have the authority to take Mr. Bundy into custody." As to the verdict, very pleased and very gratified. This jury was dedicated. They listened to our case. Just after the verdicts were announced, people emerged onto the front of the courthouse, telling the crowd of the media and onlookers. Supporters of the defendants gathered a joyous hug. One of them, Brand Thornton of Las Vegas, one of the original occupiers who accompanied Ryan Bundy and others on the refuge on January 2nd and was called as a witness by the defense, says he's been at the trial since October 2nd. "The verdict means everything," Thornton says. "It's a huge ranchers and land rights within Harney County across the West. We did something peaceful and want to stay peaceful," said Thornton, who has kept vigil outside the court blowing a shofar. "This is for the people of Oregon," Thornton said. "This was never for us." Rampler appeared on the courthouse steps and described the verdict as a stunning victory for rural America. David Fry's lawyer, Percy Olson, said it was the right result. "I think the jury through this that they were very well-meaning, well-intentioned individuals," Olson said. "The jury saw that the defendants cared about the Hammonds and didn't like how the federal government was treating them." Maxfield, who represented Rampler, came out of the courthouse holding up her fists. She says she has never seen anything like this happen, where multiple defendants in a federal court trial were all acquitted, and call it one of the most significant cases in her career. Defendant Shauna Cox said she had a peaceful feeling as she waited for the verdicts, but I didn't expect we'd all be found not guilty. "I wept," Cox said. "It brings me to tears. I'm so grateful for the jury." Defense lawyer Matthew Schneider, standby counsel to defendant Kenneth Madenbach, who was excused from court because of medical ailments, says he called his client right away. He has been fighting for more than 20 years. To be in a situation where a jury acquitted him, Schneider said, is vindication. Schneider says he believes the jury's verdict resulted from the difficulty the government had in proving that the intent of the defendants was conspired against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Bureau of Land Management. "The judge gave us broad ability to bring the defendant's state of mind, and what you saw was a number of defendants who each had their own motivations," Schindler said. "When prosecuting a drug conspiracy, it's easy to point out what the defendant's underlying objective is, but in this case," Schindler said, There was no obvious underlying self-interest. He said the defense also was bolstered because the jurors came from different regions from the state and not just from Portland. Oregon U.S. Attorney Billy Williams sat in the back of the courtroom with Oregon's FBI agent in charge, Greg Bretzig, as the verdicts were read. Williams left the courtroom early before scrum with Mumford, who attended a gathering of the League of Minority Voters in Salem Thursday night. Harney County Sheriff Dave Ward, who was the face of law enforcement during the 41-day refuge takeover, said in the statement, "While I'm disappointed in the outcome, I believe our form of government and justice system to be the best in the world. These folks were tried in a court of law and found not guilty by a jury of their peers. This is our system, and I stand by it." After the five-week trial offered a rare display, 3 of 7 defendants chose to represent themselves. 5 of them were among more than 80 people who took the witness stand to testify, and one of the original 12 jurors was dismissed after a fellow juror raised concerns about his impartiality 4 days into an initial round of deliberations, what the jury called an extraordinary circumstance. An alternate juror was summoned to begin a new round of deliberations with the remaining 11 jurors Thursday morning. This was highlighted security in and around the courthouse throughout the trial, with security officers ordered to wear a bulletproof vest and a metal detector set up outside the main trial courtroom, an overflow room with a live video feed of the proceedings. Often, supporters knelt in prayer in the courthouse corridor before the trial began in the mornings, and some kept vigils across the street, with one fellow occupier blowing a ram's horn or shofar as the jury deliberated. The case. Armand Bundy, the leader of the refuge occupation, he said he and a group of supporters staged in the January 2nd takeover to further their protest of the return to federal prison of Harney County ranchers David Hammond Jr. And Steve Hammond, convicted of setting fire to federal lands. The Hammonds lived near the refuge and had served short prison terms but were ordered to return to prison to complete a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. Bundy also sought to stake claim to the federal bird sanctuary near Burns and turn it over to locals to run for cattle grazing, mining, and logging. Bundy, who had recently moved to Idaho from Arizona, is the son of Cliven Bundy, a Nevada rancher famous for a 2014 standoff with federal authorities over grazing rights. He was arrested January 26 with his brother and Shauna Cox on their way to a community meeting of the refuge in John Day. Jeff Bantna and David Fry were arrested February 11th at the refuge, among the last 4 occupiers left. Kenneth Medenbach was arrested January 15th, and Neil Ramper was arrested in California on February 11th. The prosecutors described the case as strikingly simple. The occupiers took control of a refuge that wasn't theirs. They argued that the conspiracy began November 5th when Armand Bundy and ally Ryan Payne met with Harney County Sheriff Dave Ward and issued ultimatums promising extreme civil unrest if the sheriff didn't personally stand to protect the 2 local ranchers. They presented videos of Armand Bundy issuing a call to arms and copies of his Facebook messages in which he promised much more than a protest. They played a video of Armand Bundy standing atop a snowbank in the parking lot of Burns Safeway on January 2nd, summoning to take hard stand and join him at the refuge to draw attention to the plight of the Hammonds as well as other local ranchers abused by the federal government. That day, Ryan Bundy was the first caravan of cars that headed about 30 miles south of Burns to the refuge to clear the buildings at gunpoint in a coordinated, planned maneuver. Government witnesses testified. Other followers quickly transforming the wildlife headquarters into an armed compound that Armand Bundy openly declared would serve as a base for patriots for years to come, prosecutors said. With gun-toting guards working shifts at the front gate and in the watchtower. The Bundys and their devotees used refuge offices as their own, dug through federal records, opened up boxes of Native American artifacts stored in the basement of one office, and dug two trenches on the property and a bunker. The FBI seized 22 long guns and 12 handguns from the refuge. Federal agents bagged 18,331 separate pieces of ammunition at the refuge, 16,636 live rounds, 1,627 spent casings at the boat launch, and 68% castings at the refuge headquarters, testimony showed. Refuge employees testified about finding their offices trashed, files missing or scattered throughout the refuge, and fire equipment removed or missing. Prosecutors described Amon Bundy, Ryan Bundy, and Shawana Cox as leaders of the occupation and said the others played different roles, yet all acted to disrupt refuge employees. On notes recovered from Ammon Bundy's iPhone, prosecutors displayed the breakdown and tasks he assigned supporters. Cox, for example, was in charge of maps, titles, and had 2 thumb drives with more than 5,000 federal government documents on them when police arrested her. Ryan Bundy was in charge of land claim and Kenneth Benenbach signage. David Friday said was a computer IT expert for the group who helped get the occupation's message to the world and stayed the longest from January 8th to February 11th, the last to surrender. Jeff Banner was shown in photos carrying a revolver during the last 2 weeks of the occupation. Video captured Benenbach replacing the main refuge sign and truck decals with Harney County Resource Center signs and logos and drilling a sign into the branch office of the U.S. Bureau of Land Management that read closed permanently. The video supported by witness testimony also showed Ryan Bundy helping remove FBI surveillance cameras on a rural road outside the refuge. The seizure of the refuge had a substantial destabilizing effect on county residents and the 16 refuge employees who couldn't report to work during the occupation, said Assistant U.S. Attorney Anthony Knight. Defense lawyers argue that Amon Bundy and others didn't talk about trying to prevent federal workers from coming to the refuge, and that they faced an unfair prosecution for a peaceful political protest. Amon Bundy testified that he was divinely and inspired to occupy the refuge to stake claim to the property through the principle of adverse possession and return it to the people of Harney County. He said he didn't share his idea until a backroom meeting on January 2nd at a Yale Old Castle restaurant in Burns. He acted. He said only after local and state officials ignored his repeated requests to intervene in the case of the local ranchers returning to prison. Ryan Bundy and Cox said they traveled to Burns on January 2nd to attend the march and protest in support of the Hammonds and planned to stay just a day or two. Defendants say that they had a legal right to carry firearms. Amon Bundy testified if occupiers hadn't brought guns to the refuge, authorities would have quickly hauled away the protesters and end the takeover. Something to think about there, friends. All right. They weren't intimidating or threatening, they said. Nearly a dozen defense witnesses who had visited the refuge during an occupation testified about happy, peaceful, and even merry atmosphere there. The only violence that occurred, the defendants argue, was the hands of the state police and FBI agents who fired occupation spokesman Robert Lavoy Finicum's truck when he raced away from the police stop on January 26. State troopers fatally shot Finicum after he emerged from the truck and reached at least 3 times inside his jacket where he had a loaded 9mm pistol, police said. But when I seen the video, to see anything like that. Defense lawyers said their clients didn't even think about blocking refuge workers from doing their jobs. Some of the occupiers believed the refuge was closed and that employees were on New Year's vacation. Some of the attorneys urged jurors not to infer that their clients intended to keep federal employees out simply because government supervisors had told the workers not to report to the refuge. They also pointed out that the refuge was a public place and didn't belong to the government but to the people. During the last 2 weeks of the occupation, Bantner and Fry left the refuge headquarters building and camped out on the west edge of the property, afraid FBI agents would kill them. At that point, they were in a standoff with the FBI, not involved in any conspiracy to impede the staff of Fish and Wildlife Service or Bureau of Land Management, they said. Defense attorneys also raised questions about the FBI informants at the refuge. Prosecutors confirmed that there were 15 informants involved in the case, 9 whom were at refuge, including 3 who were identified at the trial. 6 others at the refuge remain unidentified. Without knowing who they were or what they did during the occupation, the lawyers didn't know of any of the informants conspire with defendants to commit any of the crimes alleged in the indictment. Defense lawyers argued they revealed that one of the informants at the refuge was a man who went to the alias by the alias John Kilman, but was really Fabio Miyagio of Las Vegas, who was asked to oversee the gun range at the refuge. That's interesting, see. So that's why, and that's my view. That's why they got off. Got those informants were like maybe stirring the pot, but we can't identify them. No, that's an unfair trial. You're not giving them full disclosure. That's how I see it. Okay, potential prison sentences. The federal conspiracy to impede charges against a maximum sentence of 6 years and a $250,000 fine with no mandatory minimum. Possessing a firearm in a federal facility carried a 5-year maximum sentence with no mandatory minimum. The maximum sentence for the theft of government property is 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine with no mandatory minimum. Pending prosecutions. The 7 on trial were among 26 people indicted on the conspiracy charge. 11 of them pleaded guilty to the conspiracy charge. 7 others are set for trial on February 14th, but their cases may be affected by the verdicts. If convictions are handed down in this case, then the defendant scheduled for trial in February might consider potential pleas. If there are acquittals, prosecutors may rethink going to trial on some charges against co-defendants next year. On the eve of the jury selection in this case, prosecutors agreed to dismiss the conspiracy charge against Pete Santilli, an independent broadcaster and self-described shock jock who provided live stream footage on the occupation. Interesting. There's some allegations he was an FBI informant, allegedly. All right. So I'm not here to knock him. Nevada case. Amon and Ryan Bundy also faced prosecution in Nevada in the 2014 stand-up of federal agents over the impounding of their father's cattle near Bunkerville, Nevada. The trial is set there to start February 6th. The 2 brothers and father Cliven Bundy are among the 19 indicted in Nevada. Others from the Oregon Refuge Camp occupation is also indicted on federal charges. And in Nevada are Pete Santilli, Ryan Payne, Brian Cavalier, Blaine Cooper, and Joseph R. O. Shaughnessy. And they say there's even claim too from when I did a show on it yesterday that Brian Cavalier was considered an FBI informant. Payne pleaded guilty to the federal conspiracy charge in Oregon under a potential global agreement that was in the works with Nevada prosecutors. So it looks like they'd be doing a little plea bargaining. All right, but he recently asked to withdraw the Oregon plea. No deal was reached in Nevada. Prosecutors in Portland have until October 31st to respond, so that's Monday. Cooper entered guilty pleas in both cases. Shaughnessy pleaded guilty in the Oregon case with the deal pending in Nevada. Cavalier pleaded guilty in the Oregon case. So you got some people just rolled over, and you got others that stood their ground. But it looks like it's going to be this one chapter is not completely off the hook yet. This is interesting case, like I said, because I was like keeping tabs and looking at some of the reports, and like I told people what has happened when people actually jumped the gun. Oh, they're all guilty, this and that. But you know what? You have to see entrapments. It happens everywhere. You have something big, doing a plan, even doing rallies, for example, you got to expect informants, plants, and provocateurs. And this would happen, this is an example that would happen in Bern, Oregon. And the jury seen right through them. Seen right through it. And that's what people have to realize. They have actually the prosecutions have no merit. So yeah, it's a good victory, but it's just another chapter, my friends. And I know some people just talking, complaining, and bitching, and they talking about white jurors and all that. But you know what? We'll just read this here. It goes, white defendants, white jurors outcry over race and verdicts wake. Bessie Hammond. It says here that an all-white jury would acquit an all-white band of armed protesters of wrongdoing in Mueller National Wildlife Refuge standoff riled people across America, many of whom pointed to counterexamples that say they prove a similar band of blacks or Latinos wouldn't have never been cleared. The scenes of white Mahler refuge camps walking on the same day that the police and National Guard officers used mace and batons to arrest and drive away unarmed Native Americans protesting an oil pipeline at the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation raised a particular irony. The acquittals also filed police action against diverse groups of protesters in Portland who oppose a recently approved police union contract. Twitter quickly filled with indignant tweets featuring hashtags such as hashtag whiteness work, saying if the occupiers had been black or brown, they would have been shot, not politely tried, and found not guilty. I disagree. Man, I'll tell you one thing. These guys here were armed. So the other folks had to think twice. I'll continue on. Rolling Stone writer Jesse Burney tweeted, in case you're wondering what white privilege looks like, it takes over a federal building with guns and getting off scot-free. Defense lawyer Matthew Schindler, however, pointed out that the jury was represented on Oregon's geographical diversity. The state's population is 88% white overall, and even is wider among voting age adults eligible to serve on juries. 4 of the 12 jurors were from 3-county Portland metro area, 3 were from Eugene, Springfield area, and others were from St. Helens, Commonwealth Falls, Baker City, and Hood River. Schindler would also stand by counsel for defendant Kenneth Madenbach, said the geographical diversity was very important to the defendant's case. He said it was helpful to have picked a jury from the entire state of Oregon instead of what typically happens in federal court, which you have 10 or 12 jurors from Portland. So I think there's a very balanced perspective on this case, he said. And you know what? He's right. And that's why when I hear all this garbage about white privilege and so forth, you know what? You guys are a bunch of asswipe clowns. Pathetic. No merit whatsoever. I'm sick of that crap. With your divided skin color guilt trip. It's irrelevant, unacceptable. Any questions, you tell Dr. Walter Williams. He'll just laugh at you with his own finesse of enlightenment. You try to compare this to that case that's happening with the Sioux Indians and so forth. And this is why let me just get my chest off. I've been going through the Twitter thing too, and they're saying the same thing, using the whole white thing, white people this, white people that, and I'm very disappointed with Dr. Jill Stein said something is wrong when an armed Oregon standoff faces no consequences and no DLP protests are attacked for protecting waters. Unacceptable. No, ma'am, your rhetoric is unacceptable. And here's the difference. This is a federal case, and right down there, you have to have those cockroaches, the corporate cockroaches, and the governor and his Uncle Tom Quires. That's a different scenario, and I condemn that as well. To try to compare that to the protest. Give me a break. And you're running for president right there. You may have shot yourself in the foot or have your foot in your own mouth. And I'll be honest, I'm very disappointed. Even her for making that statement. She needs to look at the bigger picture instead of assuming that, because you're white. Shut up. It's not going to get you anywhere, babe. Like I said, I'm very disappointed in her, and she's a presidential candidate saying that. You're not gonna get my vote on that, honey. And the Green Party don't like it. Too bad. This whole black-white thing is done. You have to look at it this way. It's people versus the government. All right? Whether it's local, state, or federal. That's what's happening. Dr. Stein, you know what government means in Latin? Control of the mind. Study your history before shooting your mouth off. You chose poorly on this. Doesn't mean you're always wrong. But this one here, yeah, you are completely wrong. Your rhetoric on that is null and void, invalid, or in other words, a de facto. You should learn about this case. Get transcripts on it and share it to the rest of your brothers and sisters out there. Doesn't matter if they're black, white, Asian, and even Native Americans. They had a strategy that worked. They had a lot of, and the prosecutors couldn't prove their case. So you're gonna blame it on it because they're white. If you gotta accept that, then the hell with you. Step down and go, hey, I'm an unfit candidate to be president. You know I'm right. Sorry about that. And leave the rest of these other clowns here too, saying the same thing. You know, I'm on Twitter and looking at some of the trends here, and some of them are right. Don't get me wrong, but that one there, I just disagree. I got other people saying the same thing about the whole thing, about the scenario, about the whole black and white thing. You know, but like it says here, today violence against peaceful water protesters was amped up. You know that is right. We're fighting for your rights too, and that's right. And she's right on that. Okay, and of course, you know, I like what it says here about the 117 protesters have been arrested. We also confirmed that 2 incidents were involved firearms. A protester along front line of Highway 1806 fired 3 rounds near officers. No one was injured. A woman was arrested. A shooting occurred near the Blackwater Bridge, north of the main camp. One male is in custody. The other man is being treated. That's from the Morton County Sheriff Department. Of course, you got this one person standoff supremacy. He's trying to say, hey, give the white people the land and hell with the Indians. It looks like no one really signed a petition. You gotta expect those too, you know, in these little tweet accounts. But yeah, that's how I observe it, my friends. And like I said, I'm not gonna hate, condemn, or censure her personally, Dr. Jewel Steins personally, but that right there, she chose poorly. I don't want to hear that crap anymore. It's done. Everyone's getting screwed. Jill Stein, you know what we need to do is look at go to Georgia Guidestones in Atlanta. They want to wipe out 89% of the people. Then you know what? Then come back. Then make your statement. Yeah. It's like right here is one knucklehead here. I'm not gonna say names; it's gonna be wasting my time. The Criminal Bundy brothers in Oregon standoff is the epitome of white privilege. 2 different justice systems. You know what? Shut up. Bunch of dumbed down fools. Okay, so I'm gonna try to. Ah, it's gonna be right back. All right, cool. Sorry about that, folks. Yeah, so we're going to hit another one from Maxine Bernstein. It says here on Oregon Live was how the jury reaches verdict in the Oregon standoff case. As it reads, the judge, prosecutors, and defense lawyers haggled out for hours over how the word instructions to the jury about interpreting the law to guide their verdict in the Oregon standoff trial. The instructions explain how the law defines a conspiracy, for instance, of what kind of behavior might amount to intimidation. The jury of 9 women and 3 men returned not guilty verdicts after 5 hours of deliberations on Thursday in a high-profile case that riveted the state and drew national and international attention to the federal bird sanctuary in rural eastern Oregon. Here are some of the keys covered in more than 30 pages of instructions that U.S. District Judge Anna J. Brown read to jurors and what they used to reach their decision. Conspiracy charge. A conspiracy is a kind of criminal partnership in agreement two or more persons engage in illegal activity, and it looks like I goofed up here with my microphone. Hopefully that will be a lot better. Sorry about that. Okay, it is enough to say that simply met discuss matters of common interest, acted in similar ways, or perhaps help one another. Conspiracy to impede officers of the United States. The government must provide beyond a reasonable doubt that there was an agreement between two or more persons to prevent officers of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and/or U.S. Bureau of Land Management from discharging the duties of their office by force, intimidation, or threat. The government must also prove a responsibility, a doubt that a particular defendant became a member of such conspiracy knowing is a legal object and specifically intending to help accomplish that illegal object, regardless whether the defendant or other individuals may have also had other lawful reasons for their conduct. A person become a member of a conspiracy by willfully participating in the unlawful plan with a specific intent to advance or further some unlawful object or purpose of the conspiracy. Even though the person doesn't have full knowledge of all details of the conspiracy, one who willfully joins an existing conspiracy is responsible for its as originators, the judge told jurors. On the other hand, one has knowledge of a conspiracy but happens to act in a way which furthers some object or purpose of the conspiracy does not thereby become a conspirator. Similarly, someone doesn't become a conspirator merely by associating with more than one or more persons who are conspirators, not merely by knowing that a conspiracy exists. To prove someone became a member of the alleged conspiracy and did so knowing the object was to impede federal employees, the government must prove the defendant was aware of the objective and do not act through ignorance, mistake, or accident. To prove the defendant became a member of the alleged conspiracy and did so specifically intending to help accomplish its objective. The government must prove the defendant had a purpose or conscious desire to do so. In order for speech and expressive conduct to qualify as intimidation or a threat, the defendant must intend his or her words or conduct to intimidate, to be a threat, and those words or conduct must be such a reasonable person observing them would foresee that they would be interpreted as a serious expression of intent to harm or assault. Okay, informants to investigate crimes. Law enforcement may engage in stealth and deception, such as using informants who may assume the roles of members in alleged conspiracy. The acts and statements of an informant, however, cannot form the basis of an illegal conspiracy or be attributed to a defendant who you find was a member of the conspiracy, the judge told jurors. An informant may not be considered a co-conspirator. See that? First Amendment. Defendants' political beliefs aren't on trial. Although speech and assembly are generally protected by the First Amendment, that protection isn't absolute. For example, threats and intimidations as defined instructions aren't protected, which that does make sense. I'm not going to argue with that. On the other hand, a person's speech that merely encourages others to commit a crime is protected by the First Amendment, unless that defendant intended the speech and conduct to incite as imminent lawless actions that was likely to occur. So it's a little bit of a flip-flop there, I would say, you know. Second Amendment. The Second Amendment isn't on trial on this case, the judge told jurors. The amendment gives a person the right to keep and bear arms, to own, possess, and to carry firearms, including when lawfully exercising First Amendment rights, but second rights aren't absolute. For example, the use of unlawful threats or intimidation as defined in the instructions isn't protected by the Second Amendment. Okay, so if you intimidate or pull, like, let's say you pull up a gun at somebody, that's not really, especially for criminal intent, that's not a Second Amendment issue. That's a crime subject. All right. Possession of firearms and dangerous weapons in federal facilities. Defendant possessed or caused to be present a firearm or dangerous weapon. The defendant act knowingly. The defendant or someone the defendant intentionally aided and abetted acted with the intent that the firearm or other dangerous weapons can be used in the commission of a crime. In this case, the conspiracy charge. Someone may be found guilty of possession of firearms in federal facilities, even the person didn't commit the act, but aided and abetted another in its commission. And it's right here, theft of government property. The government must prove either Ryan Bundy or Kenneth Madenbach knowingly stole or converted to use FBI surveillance cameras or a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service truck, respectively, and that the property belonged to the United States and its value was more than $1,000. So that's what the information that the judge instructed the jury. And people got to realize, too, the jury is one of the most powerful people in the courtroom. Each single juror, the 12 jurors in this case, or any criminal case that's, in the federal level, because some states got 12, others got 6. Florida has 6, for an example, on the state level. They are the most powerful person in that courtroom. The judge is the mediator, and the prosecution has information, has to have merit, and so the defense has their case too. So you have to examine everything on good faith. So based on this, the jury sent a powerful message, okay, on what has happened. Can it be jury nullification? Absolutely, is legit. And I'm going to add that to the memo right now. So I'm going to add that one more time to the memo. Fully Informed Jury Association. I'm going to add it to the memo because at least you folks could know, hey, it is part of the I'm going to put that website in there, Fully Informed Jury Association. I'll put it right next to the other one, so folks can read it and look at yourselves. And this was interesting here about the Occupy. This came out around I think January 3rd, and it says here, nativenewshotline.net and arm any government protesters take over land in Oregon once occupied by the Paiute. The Paiute, I think it is, by the Paiute. And it's interesting. So, and it says here, it's not that long. It says a group of armed anti-government militia members took over the Mahler National Wildlife Refuge headquarters on Saturday afternoon, January 3rd, 2016, in a remote area in eastern Oregon in Harney County, which is about 5 hours outside of Portland, Oregon. The Mahler Wild Refuge is located on Anchorage. That was a site for the several Paiute tribes that covered 1,778,560 acres of reservation land, which include Castle Rock, Strawberry Butte, and Civiles Rivers, Mahler Lake, and north and south forks of the Mahler River within its boundaries. The Burns Paiute tribe is located some 35 miles north of the wildlife refuge. One of the members of the militia group is Amon Bundy, who was the son of Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy, who led a month-long standoff with the Bureau of Land Management in Nevada in 2014. The main reason here is because we need to stand, said Amon Bundy to Oregon Public Broadcasting. We stand in defense, and when that time is right, we will begin to defend the people of Harney County and using the land and their resources. Protesters who are all Caucasian call themselves patriots. Others call them terrorists. Overnight, people on social media have expressed the dismay of that more force has been used to remove and has not been used to remove the protesters. Several commented if the protesters were African American or Muslim, they would already been removed and likely have been killed. Bundy asked other militias to join them on Facebook, given yesterday was a New Year holiday weekend. There were no federal employees working when the wildlife refuge was occupied by the military militia members. Yeah, so that's interesting about the whole Paiute thing, Paiute tribe that had that land first. So I like to add it in there because it's just give you guys a little brief past history about that area too, and everyone has the right to know what's going on. So, but like I said before, with the case, yeah, like I said, the prosecutors didn't really have any merit, and that's what happened. It backfired, and the jury found him not guilty. So people shouldn't be angry about it. I would say, look, The people are whining about what's going on over there, which I'm very successful having in North Dakota. We can try to compare this case to that. You know what? I would say I would go network with those folks and get some information, share information with them. Can make you guys better yourselves instead of complaining and whining. So, like I tell when people ask me about the whole race thing and how can we resolve it, at each individual talking to one another. We don't need the government to uphold it. We can do it ourselves. That's how I look at it. So, I know I'll be digressing about what the whole black white thing. I just blows my confounded mind. But I'm gonna shut up on that area. So, folks gotta look at that and like I say, I hope and pray for the North Dakota, the brothers and sisters in North Dakota, man. You know, it's very disturbing what's going on over there too. All right, that's a nice couple of long subjects there. Wow. All right. Well, next one here, I had to take a crack at it. Is by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org. Talk about debunking the Patriot Act as it turns 15. This came out yesterday by Kate Tamarello. The Patriot Act turns 15 today, but that's nothing to celebrate since President George W. Bush signed this bill into law on October 26, 2001. The Patriot Act has been ardently defended by its supporters in the intelligence community and harshly criticized by members of Congress, the tech industry, and privacy advocates like us. Despite the debates that have unfolded over the last 15 years, including last year's reform through the USA Freedom Act, there's still a lot to learn about this controversial law. Introduced in the wake of the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, the Patriot Act opened up new justifications and methods for U.S. surveillance. In recent years, the debate around the law has focused on sweeping phone records surveillance exposed by former NSA contractor Eric Snowden in 2013, but there are many aspects to the statute and how it became to be that are unfamiliar to many. In honor of the law's 15th anniversary, there are 15 things you might not know about the Patriot Act. 1. Congress did not give the Patriot Act the time or debate it deserved. Only 45 days passed between the September 11, 2011 attacks and the day Bush signed the Patriot Act into law. No one has really had an opportunity to look at the bill to see what's in it. Representative Bobby Scott said at the time the 363-page bill was considered on the House floor for the same day it was introduced, leapfrogging over deliberation in the committees with jurisdiction. It passed the Senate next day and was signed into law the following day. That expedited timeline gave members of Congress fearful of looking un-American in the wake of national tragedy little time to read, understand, and debate what they are voting on. Please. 2. Patriot Act isn't about fighting terrorism. Well, it discussed largely in the context of fighting terrorism, some of the tools that came out of the law are almost exclusively used in cases that have nothing to do with terrorism. For instance, the so-called sneak and peek search warrants standardized in the law are used overwhelmingly in domestic drug investigations. Those delayed notice warrants allow law enforcement to secretly enter and search private premises. 3. The U.S. government collected Americans' phone records in bulk before using the Patriot Act for justification. The NSA sweeping phone record collection surveillance programs under Section 215 of the Patriot Act was hardly the first time the U.S. collected American phone records. For decades, the Drug Enforcement Administration tracked Americans' international phone calls who are wholly unrelated provision of law. Even the NSA phone record program existed for years before the Bush administration first sought approval in 2006 from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to use Section 215 to justify that program. Yep, they want to think you're so damn stupid, folks. 4. The surveillance under Patriot Act goes far beyond your phone company. Section 215 dramatically expanded the business records provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, although it was most notoriously used for the NSA called Record Program and was reformed by the USA Freedom Act. Despite those reforms, the provision still allowed the FBI to obtain records from any type of business, including your car rental company, your school, or your employer. The Freedom Act is tyrannical. Okay, that's how I look at the USA Freedom Act. 5, you don't need to be suspected or committing a crime to be spied on under some provisions of the Patriot Act. Under some provisions of the Patriot Act, all the FBI needs to show is that the surveillance is relevant to its investigation, a term we know that the FBI has interpreted extremely broadly in the past. Although the USA Freedom Act's change to the law may rein in future abuses of the statute, we still don't have the full story about how the law had been used previously. Absolutely. 6, in practice, the laws of national security letters are not the precise, fine-tooth tools they're made to be out. They're made out to be. Patriot Act defenders said the often secret NSLs, the use of which were expanded in the law, are used in a tailored way to get the communications of specific individuals who are tied to national security investigations, but in practice the law is stretched by the FBI, a problem that is compounded by excessive secrecy the FBI imposes on recipients. For instance, the FBI in 2003 reportedly used NSLs and subpoenas to collect information from airlines and casino operators about almost 300,000 people in Las Vegas for New Year's that year. 7. The Patriot Act dramatically expands the FBI's authority to issue NSLs, and federal courts have struck down these provisions as unconstitutional on several occasions. The most recent of these rulings came in 2013 after a lawsuit from EFF. In that ruling, Judge Susan Ilston said the mandated secrecy around NSLs violates the First Amendment. 8. Despite reforms, the fight over NSLs is ongoing. In response to EFF landmark victory, Congress amended the NSL statute yet again as part of the 2015 USA Freedom Act. However, many of the controversial NSL provisions for the Patriot Act remained in place, and the FBI continues to issue thousands of NSLs every year. In 2016, a court upheld this new version of the statute, but the EFF appealed and fight is currently ongoing in the Ninth Circuit. 9. The Patriot Act added a huge swath of people to the FBI's DNA database. Section 503 of the law made it so that the DNA of anyone convicted of a violent crime, including assault, threatening violence, or burglary, is entered into a DNA database that the FBI uses in terrorism investigations. Hey, they can use that to entrap people, okay? 10. The Patriot Act expanded the power of the government to use wiretaps to go after computer crimes. One provision in the law, Section 202, gave law enforcement authority to get wiretaps for investigations into violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The vague federal anti-hacking law that prosecutors often use to escalate charges and penalties. 11. The law's critical lone wolf provision isn't as critical as the officials would like you to believe. In calling for reauthorization of the 3 Patriot Act authorities that temporarily expired in 2015, U.S. officials call those provisions critical for protecting national security, but intelligence officials admitted in 2015 that one of the 3 authorities, the lone wolf provision, has never actually been used. The provisions authorize the government to spy on someone who they suspect is involved with terrorist activities but does not have known ties to terrorist groups. So it's an assumption game, right? Yeah. 12. USA Freedom Act didn't fix the Patriot Act. The U.S. government moved in the right direction when Congress passed and Obama signed into law the USA Freedom Act in 2015. That bill took some positive steps towards reining in the controversial phone data surveillance programs under Section 215 of the Patriot Act, but it left most of the existing laws untouched, including other authorities that raised privacy concerns. 13. Even after the USA Freedom Act, the NSA cast a wide net when looking for Americans' phone records. The U.S. government made a series of changes to its phone records program in response to outrage after Snowden's leaks in 2013, including having the phone companies, rather than the government, store the records and limiting how wide a net the government can cast when looking for phone records. But they didn't narrow it enough when they limited their searches to degrees of separation, which sweeps in a huge number of people. If you and a suspected terrorist order pizza from the same pizza delivery place, or more invasively see the same mental health professional, the NSA can say how often when you call. 14. The Patriot Act is just a tip of the iceberg when it comes to troubling private invasive government surveillance authorities. Although the Patriot Act, along with Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, have been at the center of recent years' debate over government surveillance and privacy concerns, the law is the only one of many things that government cites when justifying its surveillance. Also in the intelligence community's toolbox are Executive Order 12333, issued by Ronald Reagan in 1981, and the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, passed by Congress in 2015. 15. The law has built-in reset buttons to ensure that we keep talking about these expansive surveillance powers. Congress included language in the Patriot Act to ensure the lawmakers would have to consider the law every few years. USA Freedom Act passed in 2015 as part of the law were expiring. The next sunset will be at the end of 2019, giving lawmakers, civil liberties groups, and privacy-minded Americans another shot to rein in widespread government surveillance. EFF has been fighting abuse against the abuse of the Patriot Act since it first passed, and will continue fighting in the courts on the Hill. To help us those fights, donate to EFF today. Hey, my friends, it's like I remember the time when the Patriot Act we're talking about it, and so during that time, that was in 2001, a few weeks after 9/11, the ACLU did a alert on that and talked about how dangerous it was. And so I took the initiative on looking at it, and I petitioned against it. And I had no shame in doing it. And I know Lincoln Diaz-Balart, if I'm correct, he voted yes on it because he's a damn stooge. And what's funny about that too, my friends, the people who in the Senate, only one person voted against it. Well, I can tell you this, James Kerry voted for it. He's Secretary of State. Hillary Clinton voted for it. She's former Secretary of State, and she's running for president. And in the extensions of the Patriot Act, Barack Obama, when he was a senator, voted for it too. That tells you something. These are the kind of people you want in office. And I know on Facebook, oh yeah, I'm supporting Hillary Clinton. I'm like, what? You're gonna endorse a person that hates freedom? And you're not talking to a man who's a Trump supporter either. I'm pretty critical of him because I remember talking about a law enforcement candidate. He reminds me of Richard Nixon. Very similar. That's not good, my friends. But this here was completely deplorable. But one good thing that came out of it is when 8 states and 400 municipalities have nullification resolutions on it, nullified resolutions on it, which is awesome. That means the local government and state government don't have to get involved. That's where you got the 10th Amendment. I'm going to try to take a chance and add that to it. I'm going to try to look for it in the Bill of Rights Defense Committee to either have that Patriot Act thing. And if I can, I will put it on there. If not, look it up. But the whole thing is totally illegal. That's why in the past, when Barack Obama was running for president in 2007 down in Miami at a rally, I was asking all Obama supporters. I was informing all Obama supporters, did you wake up in the morning saying God bless the Patriot Act? Senator Obama did. He voted yes on it. The Reauthorization Act of 2007. They're like, oh, I had a heart attack. I have the documents right here if you want to read it. Hey, the truth will set you free and piss off your enemies, right? Absolutely. All right, next one here. I'm going to This is by the Daily Shipu. And it says, remember when the media sold us the Iraq WMD lies? It's happening again. This anti-media did the same thing. So it says here, it's by, Alice Salles. Months before President George W. Bush's speech on September 11, 2002, the New York Times reported at the time. The White House officials confirmed the Bush administration has already been planning its Iraq strategy long before President Bush's vacation in Texas in August of that same year. The strategy was to persuade the public and Congress that the United States and its allies should confront the threat of Saddam Hussein. In the infamous 9/11 speech and the speech before the United Nations, the anniversary remarks both stressed the importance of ridding the world of terror. But before speaking to the United Nations, Bush made the clearest case for war, claiming our principles and our security are challenged today by outlaw groups and regimes that accept no law of morality and have no limit to their violent ambitions. Bush presented his case against Iraq, claiming Hussein had only contempt for the United Nations, claiming it had no biological weapons, and making the case that Iraq had clandestine weapons programs producing tens of thousands of liters of anthrax and other deadly biological agents for use with Scuds, warheads, aerial bombs, and aircraft spray tanks. Bush and his administration sold the invasion of Iraq with lies. How the Bush administration and the media sold the Iraq war. In 2003, the Bush's Secretary of State Colin Powell laid out Bush's rationale for war in Iraq, saying Iraq has been given several chances to comply with UN resolutions regarding the country's possession of weapons of mass destruction. He added that America had proof the Hussein regime had evacuated and not destroyed its weapons, adding that the U.S. government has satellite photos that indicated that banned materials had recently been moved from a number of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction facilities. But what the media then failed to dig into was how the evidence presented by Powell had been introduced in a way that helped the administration make the case for war, even as Powell himself knew, or at least seemed to know, that there was a possibility they were putting 500,000 troops in Iraq and marching from one end of the country to the other to find nothing. On the day Powell delivered his speech, then CIA operation officer Valerie Plame Wilson noted his claim simply did not match the intelligence which he had worked on the daily for months, making use of claims made discredited Iraqi defector codenamed Curveball. Powell ignored the fact that the CIA had deemed the source a fabricator and used the source's shaky evidence to convince the media as well as other global powers they should all go along with the U.S. plan. At this time, New York Times, which had previously openly reported that the Bush administration had been planning on selling the Iraq war using the best marketing strategies at hand, published a number of opinion pieces reinforcing the idea that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. After reports proved Bush's rationale for war had been debunked, the prestigious publication had to retract. The late Martin Ratner, an attorney who served as the president emeritus for the Center of Constitutional Rights in New York, once accused the liberal media along with the government of selling the Iraq war not by simply claiming Hussein had WMDs, but also by claiming there was a relationship between Saddam Hussein, who led Iraq at the time, and Al-Qaeda. But by referring to Al-Qaeda repeatedly during his UN speech, Powell spoke to people's fears. That was logical strategy considering the country had been healing from the 9/11 terror attacks, but the media failed to question this link, which has been established via a source who had been tortured. Ibn al-Shaki al-Libi, hopefully I pronounced that name correctly, was a high-value CIA detainee who provided bogus information as he was waterboarded. As Ratner pointed out, anyone who said anything to stop being waterboarded. Then Vice President Dick Cheney, I call him Dickhead, excuse me, and other members of the Bush administration had pressured the CIA to find a way to connect Iraq and Al Qaeda, an effort that ultimately helped boost the case for the war before the international community. What the White House wanted finally materialized when officials tortured al-Libi, the man who was waterboarded into providing phony info on the Al Qaeda link to Iraq, later died in a Libya prison of an apparent suicide. Oh, yeah, right. Like Iraq, the media now sells the political class lies on Russia, Syria. When Bush was trying to sell the Iraq war to Congress, Hillary Clinton, then in the New York Center, voted in favor of authorizing this administration to go into Iraq, basing her decision as much on the advice from her husband's advisors and from the Bush administration officials. I don't have that Hitlery voice. Sorry about that. Well, she now claims her vote was a mistake. She proved herself to be consistently pro-intervention as Secretary of State under President Barack Obama, and as a presidential candidate, having gone so far as to suggest that going against Russia in Syria by enacting a no-fly zone could save lives to hasten the end of conflict. Privately, however, she gave a speech to Goldman Sachs in which she acknowledged establishing a no-fly zone in Syria will kill a lot of Syrian civilians. Ever since the Arab Spring, the Obama administration has beat the war drums against Russia by pushing for more U.S. presence in Syria via official means. Now his choice for president is pushing the story that Russia, aka Syria's partners, is in war against Islamist rebels and ISIS terrorists, is illegally attempting to exert influence over the U.S. election, and the media embraces the move, publishing story after story and claiming officials know the Kremlin was behind the cyber attacks against the Democratic National Committee and the election systems in Arizona and Illinois. Without evidence, however, these reports are toothless but still influential enough to make Americans believe Russia is indeed a threat. If people still believe that, they need a good smack upside the head, okay? With Russia's role in Syria isn't as humanitarian as its officials would like to believe. Its proximity to Syria plays an important role in its own affairs, making its involvement in the conflict more logical than America's. Like Al-Qaeda, ISIS fighters have repeatedly used U.S. intervention in the middle to recruit more fighters, and like what happened prior to the Iraq War, the U.S. government, the Fourth Estate, are working tirelessly to sell the public on yet another justified war. Luckily, Americans aren't gullible in 2016 as they were in 2003, as many now keep up with news by seeking more independent channels. But will the next administration bother to ask us our opinion before launching another war? That's right, my friends. Something to think about. It was actually came from anti-media, and they're right. And this is why we got to stay on top of this game. This is called imperialism, and who benefits? The one world order. That includes the banksters and all those scumbag oligarchs that are trying to tell the United States how to attack. If not, this is how they think. You have to see the patterns. It's getting too obvious. That's why I didn't. That's why when I asked people why he supported Obama again, of course he was responsible for attacking Libya. Yeah, if it was like John McCain, they'll foam at the mouth. Get those effing Republicans. The people like that are a bunch of damn hypocrites. If folks want to go to war, you go on the front line, see how tough you are. Including people in Congress as well. And Hitler hit Clinton. If you get in and want to attack countries, I want your goopy posterior self over there. Okay? And watch that blubber fly, Mrs. Homer Simpson. Don't be wrong, Homer Simpson's a character, but she's the demoniac version of it, okay? All right, next here came from allgov.com, and it's entitled Pentagon Focus on Artificial Intelligence in Weaponry Pretends Robots Arm Race. It's by Matthew Rosenberg and John Markoff from the New York Times. Camp Edwards, Mass. Small drone with its fixed whirling rotors swept past a replica of the Middle East village and closed in on a mosque-like structure, its camera scanning for targets. No humans were remotely piloting the drone, which was nothing more than a machine that could be bought on Amazon. But armed with advanced artificial intelligence software, it had been transformed into a robot that could find and identify the half dozen men carrying replicas of AK-47s around the village and pretending to be insurgents. As the drones descended slightly, a purple rectangle flickered on a video feed. There's been there was being relayed to engineers monitoring the test. The drone had locked onto a man obscured in the shadows, a display of the hunting prowess that offended an eerie preview of how the Pentagon plans to transform warfare. And almost unnoticed outside the defense circles, the Pentagon has put artificial intelligence at the center of its strategy to maintain the United States' position as the world's dominant military power. It is spending billions of dollars to develop what it calls autonomous and semi-autonomous weapons and build an arsenal stocked with the kind of weaponry until now has existed only in Hollywood movies and science fiction, raising alarm among scientists and activists concerned about by implications of a robot arms race. Can we say Terminators? The Defense Department is designing robotic fighter jets that would fly into combat alongside manned aircraft. It has tested missiles that can decide what to attack and has built ships that can hunt for enemy submarines, stalking those find over thousands of miles without any help from humans. If Stanley Kubrick directed Doctor Strangelove again, it would be about an issue of autonomous weapons, said Michael Sharridge, a research fellow at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Sloan School of Management. Defense officials say the weapons are needed for the United States to maintain its military edge over China, Russia, and other rivals, who are also pouring money into similar research as our allies such as Britain and Israel. The Pentagon's latest budget outlined $18 billion to be spent over 3 years on technologies that included those needed for autonomous weapons. China and Russia are developing battle networks that are as good as our own. They can see and as far as ours can see. They can throw guided munitions as far as they can, said Robert O'Rourke, the Deputy Defense Secretary who has been the driving force for development of autonomous weapons. What we want to do is just make sure that we would be able to win as quickly as we have been able to do in the past. Just as the industrial industry spurred the creation of powerful and destructive machines like airplanes and tanks that diminish the role of individual soldiers, artificial intelligence technology is enabling the Pentagon to reorder the places of man and machine on the battlefield the same way it is transforming ordinary life with computers that can see, hear, and speak, and cars that can drive themselves. New weapons would offer speed and precision unmatched by any human while reducing the number and cost of soldiers and pilots exposed to potential death and dismemberment in battle. The challenge for the Pentagon is to ensure that the weapons are reliable partners for humans that are not potential threats to them. At the core of the strategic envisioned by the Pentagon is a concept that officials call Centaur warfighting, named for the half man and half horse in Greek mythology. Sorry about that. The strategy emphasizes human control and autonomous weapons as ways to augment and magnify the creativity and problem-solving skills of soldiers, pilots, and sailors, not replace them. I see that. Weapons in the Pentagon's vision would be less like the Terminator and more like comic superhero Iron Man, Work said in an interview. There is so much fear out there about killer robots and Skynet, the murderous artificial intelligence network of the Terminator movies, Work said. That's not the way we envision that at all. When it comes to decisions over life and death, there will always be a man in the loop, he said. Beyond the Pentagon, though, there is a deep skepticism that such limits will remain in place once the technologies to create thinking weapons are perfected. Hundreds of scientists and experts warned in an open letter last year that developing even the dumbest of intelligent weapons risk setting off a global arms race. The result, letter warned, will be fully independent robots that can kill and are cheap and as readily available to rogue states and violent extremists as they are to great powers. Autonomous weapons will become the Kalashnikovs of tomorrow, the letter said. The debate with the military no longer about whether to build autonomous weapons, but how much independence to give them. General Paul J. Selva of the Air Force, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said recently that the United States was about a decade away from having the technology to build a fully independent robot that could decide on its own whom and when to kill, though it had no intention of building one. I wouldn't doubt that. I wouldn't hold my breath, okay? Other countries were not far behind, and it's very likely that someone would eventually try to unleash something like a Terminator, Silva said, invoking that seems to be a common reference in any discussion on autonomous weapons. Yet, U.S. officials are only just beginning to contend with the implications of weapons that could someday operate independently, beyond the control of their developers. Inside the Pentagon, the quandary is known as the Terminator conundrum, and there is no consensus about whether the United States should seek international treaties to try to ban the creation of those weapons or build its own to match those its enemies might create. For now, though, the current state of the art is decidedly less frightening. Exhibit A, the small unarmed drone test this summer on Cape Cod. It could not itself and just fly off. That had to be by humans where to go and what to look for. But once aloft, it's decided on its own and how to execute its orders. The software powering the drone has been in development for about a year. It was far from flawless during the day of trials and overpassed the one pass over the mosque. The drone has struggled to decide whether a minaret was an architectural feature of an armed man living up to his namesake, Bender, the bumbling robot in the animated television series Futurama. At other moments, though, the drone showed a spooky ability to discern soldier from civilian and fluidly shift course and move on its objects could not quickly identify. So there are flaws. Armed with the variation of human and facial recognition software used by U.S. intelligence agencies, the drone adroitly tracked moving cars and picked out enemies hiding along walls. It even correctly figured out that no threat was posed by a photographer who was crouching. The camera raised to eye level and pointed at the drone, a situation that has confused human soldiers with fatal results. So it's interesting about that and hear about this whole facial recognition. There's a lot of inaccuracies in that too. You can look at some past articles and stuff I shared on Facebook. The Intercept talked about that. The project is run by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA, which is developing the software needed for machines that could work with small units of soldiers or Marines as scouts or in other roles. Unlike the drones currently used by the military, all which require someone at a remote control, this one doesn't, said Major Christopher Olorowski, Orlowski of the Army, a program manager at DARPA. It works with you. It's like having another head in the fight. It could also easily be armed. The tricky part is developing machines whose behavior is predictable enough that they can be safely deployed, yet flexible enough they can handle fluid situations once that is mastered. Telling it whom or what to shoot is easy. Weapons programmed to hit only certain kinds of targets already exist, yet the behavioral technology is successfully developed is unlikely to remain solely in America's hands. Technology developed at DARPA do not typically remain secret, and many are now ubiquitous, powering everything from self-driving cars to the internet. Since the 1950s, U.S. military strategy has been based on overwhelming technological advances. A superior nuclear arsenal provided the American edge in the early days of the Cold War, and guided munitions, so-called smart bombs of the late 20th century did the same in the conflict's final decade. Those advantages have now evaporated, and all of the new technologies that have emerged in recent decades, such as genomics and miniaturization. The one thing that has the widest application to the widest number of DoD missions is artificial intelligence and autonomy, work said. Today, software has its limits, though. Computers spot patterns far faster than any human can, but the ability to handle uncertainty and unpredictably remain uniquely human virtues for now. Bringing the two complementary skills set together is the Pentagon goal of Centaur warfighting. Work, who 63, first proposed a concept that led a Washington think tank, Center for New American Security. His inspiration, he said, was not found in typical sources of military strategy. Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, for instance, but in the work of Tyler Cowen, a blogger and economist at George Mason University. In his 2013 book, Average is Over, Cowen briefly mentioned how two average human chess players, along with regular computers, were able to beat both human chess champions and chess-playing supercomputers. It is a revelation for work. You can use ingenuity of the computer also to improve the strategic ingenuity of the human, he said. Work believes a lesson learned in chess can be applied to the battlefield, and he envisions the military supercharged by artificial intelligence. Brilliant computers would transform ordinary commanders into master tacticians. American soldiers would effectively become superhuman, fighting alongside or even inside robots. One of the $18 billion the Pentagon is spending on new technologies, $3 billion has been set aside specifically for the human-machine combat teaming over the next 5 years. It is relatively small sum by Pentagon standards. Its annual budget is more than $500 billion, but still a significant bet on technologies and a strategic concept that have yet to be proved in battle. At the same time, Pentagon officials say that the United States is unlikely to gain an absolute technological advantage over its competitors. A lot of AI and autonomy is happening in the commercial world, so all sorts of competitors are going to be able to use it in ways that surprise us, Work said. The American advantage, he said, will ultimately come from a mix of technological prowess and the critical thinking and decision making. Sorry about that. Decision making, or powers, and that the U.S. military prioritizes. The U.S. military delegates significant decisions down in its chain of command, in contrast to the more centralized Chinese and Russian armed forces. Though that is changing. We're pretty confident that we have an advantage as we start the competition, Work said, but now it goes over time. We're not going to make any assumptions. Experts outside the Pentagon are far less convinced that the United States will be able to maintain its dominance by using artificial intelligence. The defense industry no longer drives research the way it did during the Cold War, and the Pentagon does not have a monopoly on the cutting-edge machine learning technologies coming from startups in Silicon Valley and in Europe and Asia. Unlike the technologies and material needed for nuclear weapons or guided missiles, artificial intelligence, as powerful as what the Pentagon seeks to harness, is already deeply woven into everyday life. Military technology is often years behind what can be picked up at Best Buy. Let's be honest, America's defense contractors can be really cutting edge on some things and really behind the curve of others, said Major Brian Healy, 38, an F-35 pilot. The F-35's American newest and most technologically advanced fighter jet is equipped with small voice command system that is good for changing channels on the radio and not much else. It would be great to get Apple or Google on board with some of the software development, he added. Beyond the practical concerns, the pairing of increasingly capable automation with weapons has prompted an intensifying debate among legal scholars and ethicists. Ethicists. Interesting. Ethicists. Okay. The questions are numerous and the answers are contentious. Can a machine be trusted with lethal force? Who is at fault if a robot attacks a hospital or a school? Is being killed by a machine greater violation of human dignity than if a fatal blow is delivered by a human? A Pentagon directive says that autonomous weapons must employ appropriate levels of human judgment. Scientists and human rights experts say the standard is too far broad and have urged that such weapons be subject to meaningful human control. But would any standard hold up if the United States was faced with an adversary of near or equal might that was being fully autonomous weapons? Peter Singer, a specialist on the future of war at New America, a think tank in Washington, suggested there was an instructive parallel in the history of submarine warfare. Omit future, okay? Like autonomous weapons, submarines jump from pages of science fiction to reality. During World War One, Germany used a submarine to sink civilian ships without ensuring the safety of the crew, and passengers were seen as barbaric. The practice came the practice quickly became known as unrestricted submarine warfare, and it helped draw the United States into war. After the war, the United States helped negotiate an international treaty that sought to ban unrestricted submarine warfare. Then it came the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. That day, it took just 6 hours for the military to disregard decades of legal and ethical norms and other unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. American submarines went on to devastate Japan's civilian merchant fleets during World War II in a campaign that was later acknowledged to be tantamount to a war crime. The point is, what happens when submarines are no longer a new technology and we're losing? Singer said he added, think about robots, things we said we wouldn't do now in a kind of different war. Yeah. Like I said, but my friends, automated warfare, huh? Yeah, some of these articles are pretty long, so sorry about that. Something to really gotta look at and observe everything in a bigger picture. So who will be responsible if some robot took out innocent civilians? Something to really think about. Pretty dangerous there, my friends. But like I said, every high gadget has a flaw, and someone will counter that. Guarantee you that. All right, so finally, this came from naturalnews.com. And if I'm correct, who wrote this? Oh, Matter says here, why marijuana should be legalized across the globe. Long gone are the days where marijuana is seen as taboo. More and more states have been legalizing marijuana for medical use. Alaska, California, D.C., Delaware, Maine, Oregon, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, New Jersey, New Mexico, Connecticut, Michigan, Maryland, Hawaii, Arizona, Nevada, New York, Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Vermont, while Colorado and Washington have made history by decriminalizing the plant completely. Besides the United States, many countries have also began legalizing the use of marijuana. However, in some of those places, cultivating or transporting is still illegal. Cambodia, Colombia, Costa Rica, Czech Republic, Ecuador, Estonia, Jamaica, Mexico, Nepal, and among many others. After a Gallup poll was done, it showed that 58% of Americans are in favor of legalizing the natural plant. It's the first time in history that Americans are more in favor of legalizing than criminalizing the herb. Below are the few reasons why it's time to legalize marijuana worldwide. Marijuana can be used to treat a variety of medical ailments. Did you know that marijuana helps in treating epileptic seizures? It contains certain cannabinoids that have anticonvulsant properties, according to Catherine Mortati, a neurologist serving a comprehensive epilepsy center. SUNY Downstate Medical Center. Furthermore, marijuana has been discovered to relieve nausea in cancer patients, increase appetite in HIV/AIDS patients, relax muscle tension and spasms, and relieve chronic pain. It has a very low abuse risk, according to Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN's chief medical correspondent. Around 9 to 10% of adult users become dependent on marijuana. This is much lower than the dependent of 20% of cocaine users, 25% of addicted heroin users, and 30% of dependent tobacco users. Very interesting. Cannabis can be useful in treating insomnia. A number one cause of insomnia is stress, and marijuana aids with relaxation. A study by the National Cancer Institute found that patients that ingested a cannabis plant extract spray reported much more restful sleep. It has been researched that THC provides a subject with an easier time falling asleep, longer sleep, deeper sleep, and better breathing while sleeping. The National Institute of Drug Abuse and National Institutes of Health funded studies that reported that subjects were able to fall asleep easier and more quickly after consuming THC. Approximately 40% of Americans admitted to using marijuana, with more and more Americans having admit to trying marijuana at least once in their lives. It has been shown that marijuana is less addictive than coffee. Because of this, more people are finding to reason to feel safer when trying the drug. No one has ever died from marijuana overdose. There has never been any reported case of anyone ever fatally overdosing on marijuana, despite the large amounts of THC in their systems. Prescription drugs, on the other hand, have been responsible for over 25,000 deaths in 2014, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, while the Center for Disease Control and Prevention Act reported that 6 Americans died every day from alcohol poisoning. A lot of multiple sources here to look it up yourself. And you know what? I have to agree with them because I studied this stuff for a good long time, even when I was like a young man in my teens, and there was no reported deaths of marijuana just by overdose smoking that alone. So this is why during that time why it was prohibited, because the petrochemical companies like DuPont was responsible for making it illegal. That's why they put that movie out, Reefer Madness. You can just look it up, go on YouTube, check it out. There's like two versions now, but get the black and white one, the original one first, because it is totally hilarious. We laugh about it today, like, oh, you can become a serial killer if you smoke marijuana. You know what? The whole thing has been proven to be irrelevant. So I always say this, my friends: no victim, no crime. And it gets legalized. I know like states like Colorado, they have regulations. Even driving under the influence of marijuana is illegal. Okay, so just give you guys a heads up. I did take the initiative of doing my homework. So yes, I support it. No victim, no crime. It's time to end the prohibition of marijuana. And you know what? If the DEA don't like it, too bad. Get another job. I'm tired of your garbage too. Okay. All right, my friends, that is all for now. Thank you for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share this information throughout your social media networks. And it looks like I went almost close to 2 hours. Wow. All right. Well, if you have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something that's interesting I haven't checked out yet, whatever you do, please send your correspondences with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedoms Network, and Scene.life. Or you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is LokiLuck and the number 3 altogether at gmail.com. All right, the final song I'm going to be playing. It's Cro-Mags off of Best Wishes. I played Crush the Demoniac, the live version of it, when Harley and Blood Clot were sharing the vocals. This was more of a studio cut. Crush the Demoniac. It's like when I heard this song, it's like boom, man. It just blew me away, and I still love it today. Because of the show, we gotta resist all forms of tyranny, okay? And look what's happening over there in North Dakota. And we could talk about what happened in Oregon, but the message has been sent. So you gotta look at across the board. None of this black-right garbage is totally irrelevant, null and void. All right? That's how I see the world. All right, my friends, once again, thank you for your time. Let's always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.
Engaged in unbeneficial harmful works meant to destroy the world.